Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and a very special welcome to a man who, when he originally booked in to have this conversation, it was going to be midnight his time. But we worked out that that's not appropriate because we've now got him back at, I think, about 5 p.m. His time. Mr. Russ Hawkins, the CEO and President at Agilence. Welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Well, thank you, Darren. I'm excited to be here, and I'm glad it's not midnight.
Well, having said that, Russ, I have had, there was one particular person, I think about 12 months ago, who was coming in from Germany, and he booked in at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I said to him, are you nuts? And he said, no, this is when I do my most productive work. So I'm very happy to do this
Wow.
at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking, man, you're very strange, but I guess it takes all types.
Yeah, that would not be my most productive time, that's for sure. I'm counting sheep at that time of the day.
As we should, because we've got to make sure that certainly as a business leader, and we'll talk about sales and some of the challenges you've got in your industry, you've got to have rest and recovery so that you can be at your best when it comes to performance.
Absolutely.
So you don't want to be doing stuff at midnight.
Absolutely not. No, the only thing I want to be doing at midnight is watching the back of my pillow.
I love that. I love that. So looking forward to this conversation, Russ. As I said in the introduction, you're the President CEO of Agilence, which you were just telling me before we pressed record. It's the combination of agile intelligence thrown together.
That's correct.
You're a leading loss prevention and operations intelligence platform used by retailers, restaurants, and grocers to protect profit and improve performance, which I'm really interested in delving into in terms of what you specifically do in that industry. But I think before we start into the detail, we want to get a bit of a background because you've been in business for a number of years. You've been at previous organizations that you've built and then sold. You were just telling me also there's some current challenges you're dealing with as a CEO, which I'd love to delve into as well. So before we jump into that, can you give us a bit of a background on your career? And
Sure.
I guess at the end of that, what was the catalyst for you to build and start Agilence?
Yeah, well, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but I feel like I've been in sales all my life, as we were discussing, but before we came on here. I think everybody's in sales. So, my sales career started when I was a baby, when I when I wanted my parents to do something, either feed me or give me something to drink or whatever it might be. But I've always worked. I come from a long line of firemen from Boston. So my father,
Okay.
grandfather, great grandfather were all firemen in Boston.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with much money. My father, in his wisdom as a fireman, decided that he would have 7 children. And so early on, I realized that if I was going to ever accumulate any money or even be able to just pay my bills, I would need to get out there and work. So started very early as a in a paper route, and
Hmm.
when I had every other house. And of course what I said was, well, if I'm walking by the house, I might as well go in and see if they'll take the paper. And so I was very successful in growing the subscribers of the paper in the territory that I had, and that was kind of my first sales job. When I was in college, I started my own business, actually doing kind of like, if you know Avon products, the home parties, that kind of thing. Tupperware
Yeah.
does it as well. But I was doing it with women's clothing. I had been working for a clothing manufacturer, and more in a production environment. This was a part-time job, and I convinced them to let me borrow inventory. And then I recruited. I mentioned that I have seven children. My parents had
Mm.
7 children. 6 of them are sisters, and I'm the only boy. And so I enlisted my sisters and my mother and my aunts and women, my girlfriend, and a few other people to start having parties at night, invite a whole bunch of people over and show them all of this clothing we had. And so I would split it 80-20 with the person running the party, and And I ended up doing quite well and making quite a bit of money doing that, and actually even considered it going considerably further. But eventually, I did graduate from college, and I was dating a woman that was in the telecom industry at the time, and she was telling me about all the money that people were making selling fax machines. Now I'm really dating myself. Now I'm going back to, I'm going back to the 70s. But what I realized is that, technology was going to be continuously changing, and if you want to be in business and you don't have any capital to expend, a good place to be is as a salesperson. And in the technology industry, things are going to change again and again and again and again, and so you can kind of take the skills that you develop and the technologies and products that you're selling, and just move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next
Mm,
thing. So I ended up working in the telephone company business. I worked back in the early 80s in the United States. They broke up the Bell system, and so we went from this monopoly where you didn't have to have any sales skills to a completely deregulated entity and lots of different players. The Japanese manufacturers were coming in,
mm,
and so that was my first real, employment sales job where I wasn't kind of an independent contractor, and I did very, very well selling telephone systems in this deregulated environment. And as a result, I was promoted, pretty regularly, became a sales manager, then eventually a branch manager. Uh, did a couple of other kind of, I like to call them entrepreneurial things. So they're entrepreneurial, but inside of a bigger company. So I call it entrepreneurial.
yep.
But anyway, I did well there, and eventually in the mid to late 90s, everybody was making tons of money as we moved up to the Y2K and the end of the century. And I decided that I was going to leave this company. This was AT&T. It was it was a really, really big company. And I got recruited as a sales and marketing vice president into a very small startup, which was doing data communications equipment. So selling the primary application that they were doing was selling devices that connected bank head offices to branches and provided
Hmm.
communications. Now this was before the internet, so
Mm,
it all had to be done over copper wires. And what the pattern that I've developed here, I've been the CEO of three companies now at this point. That company I started as the sales and marketing VP,
yep.
but I changed the strategy of the company completely. And then within 2 years, I was the old CEO was encouraged to leave, and I was made the new CEO of the company. And what I had done is I had shifted the focus from these banking applications, connecting bank offices to branches. And what I saw was that the wireless technology was becoming more and more and more exciting, and it was just growing. At that time, this was kind of pre the time everybody had a cell phone,
Mm,
and so I focused the technology on cellular companies, and we were able to go out and build up business with most of the major cell carriers using some modified versions of the products that I inherited to provide connectivity between switching centers and cell towers. So what are the kind of things I had to do? Well, I had to harden the products. I had to make them able to be operating in high temperatures, high humidity, and in cold environments. So
mm,
that ended up being very successful. Grew the company from less than $1 million to about 25 million, and sold it to a public company. And I kind of punched my time card on being a CEO at that point, and got recruited into my second company, which is a high performance computing business. This was a business that was selling devices that connected servers inside data centers.
hmm.
So again, at the time, most of the business was with government entities and with um, universities, where they were trying to build these big supercomputers. Not now, of course, what I saw and what happened was the advent of new data centers, and that continues today. If you look at what's happening with the build out for AI today,
Yeah.
there's huge data centers being built everywhere around the world. And so I really got in at the ground floor on that. and we had some technology that was called InfiniBand, and it was intended to replace Ethernet. Now, my view of the world is that the road is littered with the bodies of companies that try to displace Ethernet in the technology business. And ultimately, this company, which was one of 14 that were funded in the venture capital community. By the way, I learned how to raise money in this process. That first company, I had to go out and raise money because the old CEO that I replaced basically had no idea what he was doing, and I needed to get out on the road, and I learned how to do the Sandhill Road Shuffle, as they say down in Southern California. Uh, and so anyway, sold that company, did well, went to the high performance computing company. Within 2 years, I had grown that company from about 600,000 up to about 20 million, and we were able to sell that to another public company. And in the meantime, I had gotten to know a whole network of venture capitalists, and one of the venture capitalists that had been an investor in that company had several other companies that he needed help with. And so I went and looked at all three of these other companies and decided that Agilence was the one that I could best have an opportunity to grow. Now it's taken quite a while to get to where we are today,
Yeah.
and I had to change the business model in the middle of it. But it was the same kind of thing. I looked at what we were doing. I went out and talked to all the existing customers. I talked to all the people in the company. And importantly, I talked to my competitors. I went out and met the CEOs of my direct competitors
Hmm.
and established a relationship with them. And even though we were in competition, there were certain things that we had common interests in, right? We had common interests in positioning our types of businesses in the greater, the greater world, and so I was able then again to change the strategy of this company. I completely pivoted it to this pure data analytics approach that we're doing
Hmm.
today, and we've been building our customer base. And my biggest challenges have been hiring people that can perform, hiring salespeople that actually know what they're doing. My view is that many professional salespeople are professional at one thing, and that's selling themselves, not necessarily being able to adapt to selling the product. And so,
Yeah.
so that's how I ended up here. And I've been here for quite a long time now, 18 years. We've gone through one whole product. About halfway through, I changed completely the business. We were originally a hardware-oriented company. With the expansion of bandwidth and the advent of the internet and the advent of cellular technology, I was able to move the company into a pure data analytics company, and to do it as a SaaS software. So
Mm.
we don't we are so in the cloud. When people ask me where we're headquartered, I say we're headquartered in the cloud. We're 100% virtual, and I've got today about a dozen salespeople around the world. Most of them are in the U.S., but last year I bought a company in the U.K.,
Hmm.
and we've got several team members over there as well. And we're off to the races. We're growing. Last year wasn't a great year. We only grew a few percent, but typically we're growing in the 15% range. And we've got 190 customers today around the world, a couple in Australia, actually.
Okay.
Compass Group in Australia is one of them.
Yep.
We're interested in expanding our business in Australia, but that's how I ended up here. And along the way, I've raised a lot of venture capital money. A couple of years ago, we graduated. I have to say we graduated. We graduated from venture capital to private equity. And so, what's the difference between those two things? Well, one of them is that you're not going to raise any more money for the most part. You're supposed to be
Mm.
self-funding. So we're funding our own growth at this point.
Yep.
The other thing that happened is that instead of having five venture capitalists that I had to keep happy all the time, I have one private equity firm. They speak with one voice. They don't take up a lot of my time. I don't have to get five people to all work in the same way. I
Mm.
have I have one partner, one investor that is basically invested in me and invested in my ideas, and it makes it a lot easier. So So we're really excited about where we're at. Sorry about being a
Love
little
that.
long-winded
No,
here, but
it's no, it's fascinating, Russ, and thank you so much for sharing that. There was a question that popped up as you were just talking about Agilence and being there for a number of years now, and I was curious to ask you what was it about Agilence that, because you mentioned there was a few organizations you were looking at.
yeah,
What was it about Agilence that you saw potential in? But then you mentioned that you've moved it from a hardware-based organization to a software-based organization.
right.
So can you talk about some of the challenges with that? Because I'm sure there would have been people within the organization who, with that change, were saying, "Hey, this is wrong. I don't know. I can't be part of this anymore." So how did you go through that, and how did you manage, I guess, the transition to
Right.
maintain, I guess, the profitability, the market presence, and so forth?
Yeah, so the first part of the question is what attracted me here is
Yeah.
that I thought that the technology delivered tremendous value and that it was underappreciated in the market. So my conclusion of the company initially was that they had a tremendous benefit, they had a tremendous value proposition, and a tremendous set of use cases, and that it just wasn't being correctly presented and it wasn't being correctly marketed and sold. And
Mm,
so I thought that that's something that I could have a significant impact on. And so I liked the fact that we could deliver value. Now, originally the company was purely loss prevention. So if you look at retailers, there's a couple of sources of loss. Some of it is expected. In the grocery business, for example, supermarket business, this spoilage stuff is going to get bad. That's part of shrink. That's part of the reduction of inventory. But
yeah.
unfortunately, it's one of the biggest ways is through silent partners. So, and I say that euphemistically, where you've got employees that are figuring out ways to game the system and to either steal merchandise or money.
Yeah.
Often, and sometimes, and maybe in some cases, often in cahoots with third parties that they're partnering with, and they're giving away merchandise and manipulating prices and those kinds of things. So I knew it was a big problem. It was,
Mm,
it's typically a three to 5%. Some companies are even worse. It comes from these kinds of losses, and
yeah.
so my reasoning was if this company's technology and the value was in the software, we just delivered it in a hardware package.
Hmm.
Uh, if I could figure out a way to get that better presented into the business, then I thought that we could grow our revenues pretty quickly. And it is mostly true. However, and this gets to the second part of the question about the transition to away from hardware. So
Mm,
initially we were selling our software packaged inside a workstation, typically a Windows workstation.
yeah.
And we were also manufacturing one thing. We were manufacturing a computer card that would go into this machine. That's the first thing I killed. I killed that
Okay.
within the first couple of weeks of being in the business because there were plenty of suppliers out there. I didn't need to be in a business where there are lots of suppliers and I could just buy that thing if I needed it. But the original application was around supermarkets for the most part. And we would put this device out in the supermarket and we would connect into the video system that existed in the business. And we would also connect to the point of sale controller, the POS controller. And so we were acting essentially as a common clock between
Hmm.
these two systems, and therefore we were giving analysts that were working there the ability to review transactions in a accelerated way. So prior to our involvement, an analyst that works for a grocery chain that has 100 stores would be sitting in headquarters and they'd get a list of suspect transactions and they'd go out into the store and try to figure out whether the video was close to where the POS system was, and then they would download 3 or 4 minutes of video, and then sit there and try to watch what's going on and figuring out what it is. Our big innovation was providing this common clock, and so there was no guesswork about where the transaction was. We
Yeah.
knew even if they weren't on the exact same clock, we knew the differences between the two. And now this analyst, instead of having to download 3 or 5 minutes of video, could literally go to the exact moment that the keys were depressed, or the item was swiped, or the card was swiped. And So that increased their productivity by some 50-fold, something like that. What used to
Wow.
be able to maybe do 4 or 5 of these in an hour, they were able to do hundreds of them in an hour. And so that provided a lot of value, and it was great. And the other thing I tried to do was to make it a recurring revenue, because
Hmm.
one of the great things about recurring revenue businesses, you don't have to get up every morning and sell another box, right? I'd been in the businesses that I were in before were all, basically hardware oriented. And that's part of why I chose the company. It's another reason I chose the company, was because I wanted to get into a software business, because I wanted to get my ticket punched as a software guy, right? That's what I wanted to do. So I'm doing career development, I'm doing market development at the same time. But what I wanted to do was to make this a recurring business. So I would package the hardware and the software and some labor in it. We would actually do the analyst services for the company. And we got a lot of people to pick us up. The problem with it, and the reason why I pivoted away from it, is that we would come in and we would find all of these people that had been stealing. We would find all of these processes that were broken. It came down to people, process, and product. The
Yeah.
people were doing things sometimes just because they weren't following procedures. Processes weren't being followed in terms of things like applying discounts in the right order or those kinds of things. And then the products often were mismarked or was sold for the wrong price or whatever it might be. And all of these things contributed to losses. And so we focused on doing that when we first got into these companies, and we would have dramatic results in the first 6 months. 6 or 8 months,
Mm.
we would find millions of dollars of product, and then after a while, the number of cases that we found would start to drop off. And the loss prevention executives that we were working with would say, "Wait, what's going on? Where are our cases?" And I would say, "Congratulations,
You
it's
solved
working.
them.
Everybody knows they're being watched. They've stopped stealing. That's what's going on here." And in fact, uh, their metric in their mind was, I have to have case. I got to do case counts. It's kind of like body bags. That's what they were
Mm.
looking for. So anyway, I came to the realization, a couple of other problems. Hardware has to be upgraded regularly. If I'm doing it as a recurring revenue model, I own all that hardware.
Yeah.
I have to keep them upgraded. I have to keep the virus protection upgraded. So it became, and they break, right? They break. So I have to have a break fix operation as well. It got to be too much of a headache. We grew the company to about 5 million in revenue, and then I decided. I went to the board, at the time venture capitalists, and I said, "Look, we're not going to be able to scale the way we want to scale here. We got a great product, we've got great ideas, but we're not going to be able to scale this way. So I want to get out of the hardware business altogether. The internet has now become fast enough that I can do a lot of this stuff over software only.
Yeah.
As far as the video vendors and the POS vendors, I've got relationships with most of them already. I can just do this all in software. And so I made this transition to being software only. And now it became a much cleaner business. Now I was just renting access to our software and providing consulting services, essentially best practices and those kinds of things, to help those companies be more effective. And they were responsible for the body count, for the cases, and
Yeah.
for all that other stuff. And the business just took off. I mean, we just started growing, and we're up about 25 million today in committed recurring revenue, growing at about 10 to 15% a year typically is what we've been growing. And we're building new products. I bought a company. I'm looking for other acquisitions. And we've built a sales model here. We've built a set of use cases. So when we go in and talk to customers now, and what I try to train all my new salespeople about is, number one, the number one thing they need to do: listen, not talk. Stop talking and start listening. If you're going to be a salesperson, you have to listen. And the first part of the entire conversation should be asking open-ended questions, so that the people can start talking. Once you get them talking, they're going to give you all kinds of information that you're going to be able to use and package back. And so if you ask open-ended questions and you listen carefully, you take a lot of notes, then you're going to be able to say, "Okay, Mr. Customer, maybe not on the same, usually not on the same call. Let me go back to my office. Let me figure this out. Let me come back to you with some
Mm.
ideas about how you can do things." And
Yeah.
uh, and
Yeah.
typically, when you get them to open up, you can identify, sometimes many, many, maybe too many, but you can identify at least half a dozen kind of big hitters. and then go back and say and think about how you can take your product and apply it to solve or at least ameliorate some of the problems associated with these issues. And so, what happened to us is that some of the problems weren't loss prevention problems. Some of them were more just process problem, more process stuff. Some of it was related to employee management, frontline employee management, people giving people information about what they should do when a certain set of circumstances happen. And
Yeah.
so now we've built a set of use cases. We've got several hundred of them at this point, and they're in three major categories. One of them is that loss prevention area. I like to call it cost and expense control. Second area is in revenue enhancement,
Mm.
driving more revenue. So how do we do that? Well, how effective is your loyalty program? How effective is your promotions? If you're a restaurant chain and you're running a limited time offer where you're going to offer a $5 dinner as a loss leader, well, how effective is it? How do you know it's effective? Well, in the old world, you'd have to wait a week or a month or some later time to go back and gather all the data and then look at it and try to figure out whether you actually got what you expected out of the promotion. We can give them feedback the next day about
Wow.
how all the sales went yesterday, and we can even identify stores that, boy, they didn't have very many sales. I wonder what's wrong. Go and call that store and find out what's going on. And you learn that they didn't put out the promotional material, or they didn't train the frontline people. So
Yeah.
so we have a whole bunch of things around revenue enhancement that we do. And then the third area is in compliance. So, I like to think of compliance in two ways. The first compliance area is external compliance, legal compliance. You don't want to get in trouble for not checking IDs in a liquor store, or not checking IDs in a cannabis operation, or
Mm.
not or accepting large amounts of cash if you're a grocer and you're essentially money laundering. So those are an example of external compliance. But the more important part of it is what I call internal compliance. So this is a question of aligning things from the boardroom down to the stock room, as I like to say. So the company has some vision of what they want to do. They have a strategy. They talk about it in the boardroom, but oftentimes that gets diluted or never even reaches the frontline people. And so what I like to call that is internal compliance and helping people understand what they're supposed to do in certain circumstances. So we have a functionality that is based on monitors. So we can monitor the data. We can take set up a monitor that's usually a combination of data elements. So let's use upselling, for example. So upselling, you pretty much at the point of sale, everybody wants to sell a little bit more, right? If you're in the food business, Panera Bread is one of our customers. If you're Panera Bread and you're in there for lunch, you want to sell them a couple of bagels for tomorrow morning, right? If
Mm.
you're in a shoe company, hey, you want to sell them some shoe polish or some extra shoelaces, right? But how do you monitor that, right? So what we can do is we can set up a monitor that looks at every transaction in every store, at every register, with every person every day, and we can tell you how effective they are automatically. It can automatically generate an alert to you that tells that store manager, or maybe even at the cashier level, tells them, "Hey, you missed this objective.
Mm.
You need to take the following steps to make that happen." And so it becomes a lot of around frontline people management, which is an area I'm very, very interested in, and I'm looking at potential acquisitions in those areas. And so we've built this very, very big library of use cases. We train our people to to first listen, and then to talk in terms of benefits, in terms of what's in it for me, what's in it
Again.
for that customer. How are
Yeah.
they going to get it? How are they going to get a benefit out of this thing? And then we train them to build ROI and payback metrics on these companies. And sometimes we're even successful doing that. I can tell you, as I mentioned earlier, hiring salespeople is a difficult, very, very difficult thing to do. Extremely difficult. Usually they're very, very good talkers, able to sell themselves extremely well. You get excited when you talk to them, but then you get them out in the field carrying a bag, and you find out what some of their frailties are, and you need to
Yeah.
work on that over time. So, I've hired a lot of salespeople in my life, and I've done a lot of sales training in my life, and despite the fact that everybody's in sales, not everybody knows how to be in sales and knows how to do what needs to be done to be successful.
That's it.
And I like to take the speech that I make with my people all the time is, hey, this is a bit, you're running your own business here, right? I'm providing all the capital, I'm providing the products, I'm providing the infrastructure, I'm even paying you a base pay. But
Yeah.
you have to think about this as your business and how are you going to convince people to buy from you? And that's where you need to think about it. I've been moderately successful doing that, but certainly not perfect in some of those things.
So Russ,
So I
it's
feel like I'm just rambling on here.
no,
So let
no,
me stop.
it's no, I'm really enjoying this. I wanted to ask you though, the transition you made when you made that decision, standing in front of the board or the venture capitalists and saying, "Hey, we need to move away from hardware because the future is in software. It's all in the cloud. We'll be more nimble,
Yeah.
more flexible." How difficult was that to sell to your existing base of people within the organization? Did you lose some through the transition because they were hanging on to the old way of doing things, or did most of them come along the journey for you because they'd see the vision that you'd set?
So we were a very small company at the initially, and so yeah, we did lose. We lost some salespeople because they were not comfortable selling software, and we had to recruit new people.
Yeah,
Not all of them left, but a few of them left. Most of our product development people were developing software anyway.
yeah,
We just happened to deliver it in a hardware package. And then there were people that were involved with the hardware. So IT operations. We had people, as I mentioned, were manufacturing a product, so that those people, moved on and went elsewhere. And so I would say though that the core um, value that we had was in the software. And we were able to retain most of the software people that we had at the time. And
yeah. Okay.
that's an area that we've made huge investments in. And I've been extremely lucky in being able to recruit a really stellar CTO, Chief Technology Officer. I have a really, really strong, he's now a COO. I just promoted him to COO, but he had responsibility originally for marketing. I gave him responsibility for product marketing and then eventually product management. And then more recently, I gave him responsibility for our customer success, our ongoing customer support. So he's now our chief operating officer. And I've been very, very, very lucky to hire good people. And my philosophy there is if you got people that know what they're doing and they prove to you that that they know what they're doing, get the hell out of their way and let them do what they need to do and let them, my job today really is providing a strategy, kind of motivational with people,
Yeah.
allocating capital, and I spend a lot of my time on the sales side. I've spent a lot of my time out in front of customers
Well,
because
that's
I think of myself as the chief salesperson.
well,
But I'm
that's
not
what.
involved in everything. I mean, I
No, no.
usually only get involved. I get involved when I see my salesperson or my sales vice presidents. I have two sales vice presidents, and then each of them has about a half a dozen salespeople. One handles new customer acquisition. The other one handles expansion inside of our 190 customer installed base.
Yeah,
So they're
yeah,
there trying to sell. We built two new products in the last couple of years. One is a case management product. The other one is an audit product, audit management product. And the idea is to sell those into our installed base.
yeah.
We've also disaggregated the software into modules. So when we first made the transition, it was an all-you-can-eat kind of model.
Mm.
That is, you bought our software, and then you just keep putting more data in and more data in and more data in. And then we realized that every time they brought more data in, they were getting more value out of it, but I wasn't getting any. So what I decided to do,
You
what
need
I
to
decided to do was modularize it. We now have a core software product. And then we sell an
modules.
RFID module, we sell
Yeah,
an inventory module, we sell a cash management module, we sell a video module, we sell an alarm module. And so what we're able with all of these additional products now, I'm able to take this other team, focus them on the existing customers, and then grow revenues within those customers over time. And so,
I love that.
so that's what we do, and that's what my job is strategy, motivating, coming up with ideas, and allocating capital, and then
Love it.
and
Love
then
it. And you mentioned earlier that the company is pretty it's virtual. So I wanted to ask you, as CEO of an organization that is largely a virtual organization, particularly with
Yeah,
two VPs of sales and a number of salespeople, how
yeah.
challenging is that to, I guess, keep people together, build the collaboration? Because there'll be people listening to this that either work in a fully virtual environment or maybe a hybrid environment where they've got a physical location plus people in different regions. As a CEO, how challenging has that been to try to keep everybody on the same page and everybody engaged and connected to the organization?
It is a challenge, and it continues to be a challenge. So, we went virtual with the pandemic at the beginning of the pandemic, right? And when all the and the pandemic was a huge challenge in the retail and restaurant
Yeah,
business. I mean, it just
totally.
nobody was operating, so it was really really hard. And so I'm very fortunate that I had a great CTO in 2019. He was helping us prepare for snow days, right, for the winter, so that when the snow day happened, we could just operate seamlessly because most of us are working on screens anyway. I
Yeah,
had already gotten rid of the hardware business, so I didn't have to have my break fix, office. I mean, I had an office with a laboratory, and we had video systems, and that stuff had all gone away. So we had a business that that allowed itself to go virtual, right? I mean, we weren't dependent on anybody picking something up and moving it over here. It was
mm,
all done on the internet. Um, with the pandemic, because we were ready for snow days, we were able to go seamlessly to working remotely the whole
mm,
time. And so it was kind of forced on us at first, and I didn't like it at all at first. I didn't like it at all. And I had to do an awful lot during the pandemic. I once a week I would have a company conference call, and I would, we would talk about what was going on. I would be encouraging. We would sometimes play games. We would bring in third parties to try to keep everybody working together.
yeah,
And then when the pandemic was over, we kind of said, well, this has some pretty positive things, but it also has some pretty negative things. So here are the things that are working and don't work. My engineers love it. They absolutely love it. The individual performers on the engineering business, they absolutely love because all I used to hear from them was complaints about the commute and the need to be in the office and the noise. We had an open office plan. They didn't like the noise, and these guys were for the most part sitting there coding. So they're extremely happy. We have developed ways to keep them productive. We have regular sprint reviews. We work in a sprint environment. So we do use Zoom and Teams very 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 extensively across the business, and each organization has adapted to their own way. So
mm,
the developers have several standing meetings that happen during the week, and then there's a lot of touch bases that go on, and they're so happy to be working from home that we get better productivity out of them.
yeah,
Our IT operations people, now these are the people that are keeping our systems up and running. We do run our own data centers. And we also use Azure, and we also use AWS. And so what they've done, which I find very interesting, is that there's about a half a dozen guys that are working on this. They're on Zoom all day. They're all on Zoom all day. And you can go, I can go and enter their Zoom room, and they'll all be sitting there as if they were sitting in an office together, and they collaborate with each other. And then if I want to talk to them, they'll go, all right, well, why don't we go to a room, and we'll go to a virtual room off of Zoom, and then we'll have a one-on-one discussion there. And then I'll say, okay, fine, and then they'll go back to the group room. So that's how our IT operations people operate.
wow,
The salespeople have always been remote anyway. So
yeah,
for the
okay,
most part, I don't want the salespeople in the office. Even if I had an office, I don't want them there. I want them out in front of customers. I believe face-to-face sales is way better than over the phone. And you have to have the right product. Obviously,
yeah,
there's all kinds of sales and there's all kinds of products. But for our product, my belief is you're better when you're on-prem and
yeah,
you're gathering information. You're out there listening, you're watching, you're seeing interaction, you're learning things that you're not going to learn over Zoom or over the phone. And
Mm.
so they were already remote, and they just continued to be remote. Now we've had to modify the way that we do our funnel reviews and our pipeline reviews, but we've developed a process where once a week the whole team gets together with me and with the sales vice president, and we do separate sales vice presidents, and we
Yep.
go through the funnel. We go through all the deals they're working on. We talk about, what kind of actions they can take. And so we've adapted there. The place where it hasn't worked very well, so all those places have worked well. The place where it hasn't worked well is in our customer success organization.
Right.
And by the way, there's some downside in these other areas as well, because you do lose the so-called managing by walking around kind of
Yep.
aspect to it.
Yep.
I used to love, and that's what I miss most, is just to be able to sit in on a meeting or walk down the hall and talk to someone. Now you got to do it, you got to do it over Zoom
Virtually.
or Teams. But the other thing is, I insist that people keep their cameras on when we're on. Some people don't want to put their cameras
Oh,
on; they're
yes.
hiding.
Has to
I,
be.
I, I insist they keep their cameras on. But customer success is the area that we've had the biggest challenge. And part of the reason for that is that it's our entry level job for the most part.
Yep.
This is where we're recruiting people into the business. We have relationships with a couple of universities, and we bring on interns from those universities. Typically, we have a half a dozen of them at any one time. The whole objective is to get them before they graduate so that we can sell them on coming to work with us, right?
Yep.
Like I say, we're selling every day. We're selling all kinds of things,
Totally.
including selling people on coming and joining the company. These people are young, they're social, they want to hang out, they want to go to lunch, they want to kibitz with each other. There's a heck of a lot less of that goes on. And
Yeah.
that, in my view, is a problem. I also believe that, like I met my wife at work. There's not a lot of opportunities to meet people at work, and
If you're
it
working remote.
probably today is our biggest problem. Our biggest problem
Mm.
is that people really don't get to know everybody the way they would do in an office, right? There's a lot more kind of understanding what other departments do. There's a lot more, discussion among people, a lot more relationships that develop, sometimes serious relationships. So there's
Yep.
less of that, and we try to make up for it. We used to do them monthly. We're now doing it semi-monthly. We do semi-monthly happy hours. So I taught everybody how to make my famous cosmopolitans. I'm well known for making a mean cosmopolitan. So I had a session where I made it, showed everybody how to make a great cosmopolitan. And then we do trivia, we do other games, and we hire some third-party companies to come in and do some of these. And we try to do it every other month. And that works pretty well. And then we started doing 3 times a year, bringing the entire company together. As we've gotten bigger, we've gotten more people. That's become more and more expensive. I've got people
Yep.
in Europe now, so we've kind of reduced that down. So we do that just once a year now. We bring everybody together. We have a 3-day meeting. Some of it is me up in front of the room talking, but a lot of it is groups meeting among themselves, and then intergroup discussions happening. And we try to structure it so that people get to know each other. And we usually do some team building kind of things and those kinds of things. But it's
Mm.
not perfect. And it definitely has some downsides. And I still think of it as a big experiment.
Yeah, well, because the thing is, and COVID was a big pivot for this, wasn't it? That before COVID, it was rare that people would be doing meetings like this, right? Because your
Right.
normal way of doing business was nose to nose, toe to toe in a physical location, and the concept
Right.
of actually doing business with somebody who's on the other side of the country or in another country altogether was foreign for many organizations. So
Correct.
with that
Yeah.
comes opportunity because, as you rightly said, there might be people who are quite technical that like to be remote where they could just do their thing and not be disrupted. But there are others, maybe because of their personality type, but also because of the role, they probably need to be together with others as well. So it's a
Yes.
challenge.
Well, and they self-select out, right? So
Yeah.
I just had an all hands meeting. I do all hands meetings 4 times a year as well. And I just had an all hands meeting, and we have a thing called the box where people can anonymously put in questions, and
Yeah.
then I will address them at the all hands meeting. And somebody said, well, is there any way that we could have an office where I can go I want to go to the office a few days a week. I don't want to
Yeah.
be at my house 2 days a week. And I just had to tell them, I said, well, it's not likely that we're going to do that. I mean, we have an office, we have an office in New Jersey. I'm in Massachusetts. We have an office in
Yeah.
New Jersey, and I used to live in New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey for 32 years.
Yeah.
And with the pandemic and with all this virtualness, I decided to move to where I had a vacation home.
Yeah.
And I'm not going back to the office, I can tell you that. But I had to tell this person. I said, look, it's we get very solid feedback from everybody in the company that they do not want to go back to the office in any significant way. And quite frankly, I don't want to spend the money. I was spending $500,000 a year on an office. I don't
Yeah.
want to spend the money on an office. And then one other
Yeah.
thing that you mentioned a minute ago that I want to come back to is that not only is it that some people, that you get bigger reach with customers, I get a lot bigger reach with people now. I can
Mm.
hire people anywhere in the world, and I can get
Well,
really good talent that before used to have to be within a certain, circumference of time around where we operated.
and that's what I
So
wanted to
that's
ask
helped a
you because
lot.
no, because I appreciate that, and I also conscious of time because you've got a very important date at on the hour, which we need to let you get to.
I can run a little over if I need to, but
That's fine. As the CEO, I wanted to ask you because you mentioned before some of the characteristics you want to see in the salespeople. Obviously, great listening skills, asking phenomenal questions, and not making it about themselves and the product. Even though the end result will be the customers will be buying your product. When you look
right.
at your sales team, when you look at bringing in VP of sales, when you're looking at bringing in good sales professionals, are there specific characteristics that you look for that you think are going to complement what the business stands for, but also the vision you've got for the business?
Well, we mentioned the listening skills, so they've got to be able to demonstrate that. The other part of it is they have to be able to express themselves effectively, whether it's in written word or in verbal word. They need to be able to gather their thoughts and make an effective presentation and make an effective statement carry on an effective dialogue with customers.
Yeah.
They need to be light on their feet. I'm not saying it's easy to find all these people. They need to be light on their
Yeah.
feet. They also have to have a willingness to work hard because I think sales is pretty simple. You got to know your product. You got to know what your product is. And so I expect people to be their own. I mean, we have systems engineers that work with them, but I expect my salespeople to be able to demonstrate the product, to be able to understand how the product is structured, that they can talk somewhat technically. They don't need to be PhDs here. They don't need to be
Mm.
data scientists, but they need to be able to know the product and they need to be willing to know the product, right? So they have to have two things there. One is they have to have the mental capability of understanding how these products work, and they have to have an attitude that is a hungry attitude. They need to want to learn how the product is. So that's
Mm.
to fulfill the know your product. Then the other second thing you need to know, and we try to help them with this, is you got to know your customer. Who is it
Yeah.
that you're selling to? Which segments of the retail business? We do retailers, and there's all kinds of different retailers. We have most of the shoe companies in the United States. We have lots of apparel businesses. We have lots of companies that sell hard goods, like
Hmm.
hardware stores and those kinds of things. But we also do pharmacies. We do restaurants, both table service and quick service restaurants. And then we also do hotels. So that's an awful lot of things to learn. And
Yeah.
we and you've got to demonstrate, for me, you've got to demonstrate a hunger to gather knowledge and to learn things. So knowing your customer, knowing what the customer's problems are and what they're doing. And by the way, I think AI is helping us tremendously here today.
Mm.
These large language models make it easy to do research, and it may not
Yeah.
always be right. They got to check on it. But so know your product, know your customer, and then it comes down to the hard work. See lots of people. See
Mm.
lots of people and ask them all to buy.
Yeah.
Know your product, know your customer, see lots of people, ask them all to buy. Do those four things, you're going to be a winner.
Mate, Russ, it's fascinating actually the number of sales teams I work with and salespeople who do the first three things pretty well, but for some reason they have this reluctance to ask the customer to buy.
Absolutely. No, they're afraid. I don't understand why. If they're demonstrating no confidence if they do that. I do
Oh,
believe in always be closing. I mean, all your questions as you're going along, you're trying to figure out, are you going to have enough ROI? Are you going to have enough value to deliver that you're going to, at the end, when you're ready to ask them to buy, it's a no-brainer almost. It's,
well,
hey, I already
absolutely.
showed you that you can make money here, you can make money there, you can save money there, you can save money there. Here's the contract. sign hard. It's 3 copies. I mean, you, you gotta ask for the close. You have to ask for the sale. No one is ever gonna. I mean, just think about it. This gets back to everybody's in sales, right? I like to
Yeah.
use the analogy of a single guy, trying to find a wife, trying to find a partner, or whatever kind of
Yeah.
partner they want, right? You got to give them a reason to talk with you, and you got to close. Will you go out with me? You got to
We,
be strong enough to do that. It's not going to happen if you don't. No one's going to date you or go home with you if you don't ask. You got
well,
to
and
do
that's
it.
the thing. That you might put yourself in a position to be rejected, but I guarantee you will not get the result if you don't ask.
Rejection is just one step on the way to yes, right? A no is one step on the way to yes.
That's
I
it. That's
mean,
it.
you got to be rejected. You got to, maybe that's something I ought to add to the list, right? You got to be willing to take rejection and just move on. Just keep going. You got to be like the Terminator, you fall down, you get shot, you pick back up and keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
And the key thing about that is the rejection is not personal. Unfortunately, a lot of salespeople take it personally because they think they're being rejected as an individual. Effectively, what the
Right.
customer's saying is, you know what? No, they're rejecting themselves. They're rejecting the opportunity to actually improve their business to drive better
Absolutely.
profitability. That's a reframe. So just ask the question. Just ask.
Ask the
What's the
question.
worst thing that
Ask it
happens?
again, and then ask it again, and
That's
then
it.
explain why the answer is wrong if it's a no, and ask it again and keep asking.
But I will say, and we've talked about this through this conversation, is as everybody's in sales, but ultimately selling is about solving problems that customers or potential customers have, right? So we're not going to ask somebody to buy something that doesn't definitively solve a problem that the customer says they want to solve or they need to solve. So this is not
Absolutely.
about trying to force customers to buy stuff that they don't want. When we've taken them through the process, if there's a match, then the natural consequence of that should be we're going to do business. But the customer's going to
If
wait for
you're
you to ask.
Absolutely. If you're asking up front the right open-ended questions, you got to choose your open-ended questions correctly. What you're doing is you're structuring those questions around areas that you suspect are
Yeah,
problems for that customer and let them bring it up to you. Let them tell you what the issues are,
totally.
right? I mean, I already know what issues grocers have. But if I'm out talking to a grocer, I'm going to let them tell me what it is, and then I can go back and solve that problem for them or show them how using our software can help them solve the problem. So I completely agree with you. You got to be solving problems. I like to think of myself as a problem solver, even in the context of my investors and my
Yeah.
people and everybody else. And a good, I got to add that to my list of things I do. I set strategy. I motivate, I allocate capital, and I solve problems. That's what I do.
You are the chief problem solver officer.
Chief problem solver.
Russ, been a pleasure having you on the podcast. For people who are listening to this who'd like to know more about you, but also more about Agilence, and you mentioned before you got some customers in Australia. So where's the best
You do.
place for them to connect with you, first of all, but also to learn more about Agilence?
So my email address is rhawkins, that's HAWKINS, at agilenceinc.com. And it's AGILENCEINC.com. And the company can be found at agilenceinc.com. Would love to talk to some of your listeners if there are any retailers out there that have multiple locations, generally speaking, we're not really dealing with single location retailers, but if you're out there and you own a retail chain or a restaurant chain or whatever it might be, or you're involved in those companies in some other capacity, I would love to talk with you.
Brilliant, lovely. I'll put all that on the show notes. And once again, Russ, thank you so much for joining us on a more appropriate hour in
Yes.
Massachusetts rather than the
Th-
middle of
Thank you
the
for catching that. Thank you for catching
night.
that, Darren. And I've enjoyed, as you can tell, I enjoy talking about this stuff, and I enjoyed having the opportunity to chat with you today.
No, I appreciate it. Enjoy your evening. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.